This is the Beginner's Guide to Squatting. And today we're going to talk about everything you as a beginner need to know about getting into your first couple of squats, all the form and technique involved, and also some common errors and mistakes that might pop up so that you can identify and fix those now rather than find out later on in the form of pain or injuries. On top of that, we're also going to cover a couple different squat variations that you'll be able to go through on your own so that depending on what type of workout that you're performing, you can maximize the results that you are seeing. So with that being said, let's squat it out. All right, so let's break down that squat technique. Now, first of all, when we're starting out, we're going to keep our feet just about shoulders width apart. Toes are going to be slightly rotated outwards. I'm using my hands just to demonstrate here. Toes are going to be rotated outwards. As far as the width goes, I always tell people to find a position where you feel most comfortable, okay? So if you have to adjust that a little bit as we go along, go ahead and do so. And as far as how far out to rotate your toes, one thing to pay attention to as we drop down into the squat, if we were looking straight down here, as our knees come forward and down, they should be following the direction. If this was our toe, they're kind of tracing the same direction, our knee tracing over our toe. So they should be following the same direction here. If your toes are pointing out this way and your knees are going this way, then we're gonna pull the toes inwards just so the knee is going over the toes there, okay? So again, opening up about shoulders width apart, toes are slightly rotated outwards. When we're ready, we're gonna drop the hips down, just like if you were trying to sit back into a chair, okay? Sit back and press on upwards, okay? Sit back and press on upwards. Sit back and press on upwards. Now, when we're pushing ourselves up, what we're gonna focus on is making sure that we're pushing through our heel. So that's the back of our foot, all right? If you feel some pain from the knees, in your previous squatting experiences, you might wanna pay attention to whether you're shifting a lot of that weight onto the front, like where your tippy toes are, and bring that weight back towards the back of your foot where your heels are. Now with that being said, we also wanna make sure we have our balance. Some of the time when people are focusing too much on keeping that weight on the back of the heels, the toes lift off of the floor, which is not a bad thing until you start losing balance. Okay, so make sure your weight is evenly balanced. When you're ready to push your weight on up, make sure pushing through the heels and straight upwards. As far as how far down to go with the squat, for most of these movements, we're gonna stick to having the hips and the legs right here, just about parallel to the floor. Okay, so once we hit this point, we're gonna push ourselves all the way back up. And that is your squatting form and technique. These are the basics. Practice these before you move into any weighted movements. Now let's talk about some common errors and mistakes that people run into when they're getting started in their squats. So the first mistake, just as I was pointing out earlier before, is shifting that weight onto the front of your foot too much. We want to make sure most of the weight is on the heels. We're pushing through the heels, but at the same time maintaining the balance across our foot so that we don't topple over or feel like we're gonna topple over while we're squatting. So dropping down, pushing through the back of our foot, dropping down, pushing, pushing, and pushing. So the second thing that we want to pay attention to is our knees. If on the way down, our knees should move naturally with the way that our legs are positioned here, and back up, and back up. If you notice your knees pushing out too far out, let me give you a better example. If your toes are closed out and your knees are pushing outwards like this, or if your knees start pushing inwards, then that's something that you want to slow down on and pay a little more attention to. In fact, I would actually scale that back and start out from a seated squat instead if that were something that you're experiencing. So those are kind of the two most common errors that I tend to see people make when they're just getting started with their squats. Let's dive into a couple different movements that you can go through in order for you to strengthen your squats and get better at squatting throughout all of your workouts. So let's get to it. The squat that we've been focusing on the most up to this point is what we would consider our body weight squat, just a regular squat here And that's the one that I would actually recommend you pay most attention to, especially when you're starting out, just to make sure you've got the technique, the form, things of that nature dialed down before you decide to add any weight or intensity into that mix. Okay, but if the bodyweight squat is something that you're not able to perform and you don't feel quite comfortable, whether it feels a little heavy for you, your knees are shaking a little bit as you're going through those motions, then a really simple replacement would be a seated squat. And we're gonna go through a couple of variations. So this is pretty much the same technique as your regular squat. However, we're starting from a seated position, so that's gonna take some of the weight off of your legs for you, but also allow you to pay more attention on that pressing upwards motion that the squat contains, okay? So we're gonna start from a seated position. We're gonna, again, maintain most of our form and technique here. Feet about shoulders width apart, toes are slightly rotated outwards. When we're ready here, we're gonna push through our heels, strong push, and straight up. When we're ready, strong push, and straight up. Pretty much what you're doing is you're just pushing through your heels and you're standing up straight. And that is your seated squat. Now, if we wanted to add a little intensity to the mix, but you don't feel comfortable moving over to the regular squat just yet, a couple of ways that we can do this is, one, grab onto some form of weight. Doesn't have to be a kettlebell. Any form of weight, just make sure you have a firm grip here and keep it up to the chest. Now, one thing to pay attention to when we add weight into any movement is we're gonna make sure the core is nice and engaged there so that the upper body and the lower body moves together, okay? That's gonna help protect your lower back, your spine, and a lot of the things around that area. So, same movement here, firm grip, core is engaged. When we're ready, strong push through the heels, and up, and up, and up. So that's just a weighted seated squat, okay? It's great for helping you build some strength while taking out some of the attention and mechanics that you need to pay attention to when you're going through your regular squat. Now, another variation that you can go through is a single-legged squat from a seated position. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna take all of the weight involved and move it over to one leg so that we can focus on building strength at one leg at a time. This is great for balancing out any imbalances from left side to right side. It's what's considered an isolateral movement. We're working one side at a time here, okay? So in order to do the single-legged squat from a seated position, we're gonna start sitting down. Again, feet are gonna be in the same position here. Now, if you need a little extra support and you don't feel comfortable raising your foot off of the floor while you're doing this, then go ahead and just real lightly keep your toes on the floor. You don't want to end up pushing through this foot. One foot's going to be pushing, the other foot is just going to be either off of the floor or just very lightly touching, okay? So when you're ready, you got your balance, push through the heels, up, up, up. Now, when you're doing a single-legged squat, the most important thing to pay attention to is your balance. Again, the squat is going to be an up and down motion. You shouldn't have too much side-to-side wobble, okay? That wobble is only going to lead to a higher risk of injury, so make sure you reduce that wobble. The way you can do that, slow the movement down. Don't push up before you're ready, okay? Sometimes people get really rushed to like get to the next rep, next rep, next rep. That you don't prepare yourself, make sure you're ready and push on up. Ready, push on up. Ready, push on up. And a big part of that equation is also keeping the core engaged, okay? That core, again, is gonna stabilize the upper body, the lower body while we're going through this motion. If you'd like, we can also add weight into the single-legged seated squat. Cool. And those are the movements that you can do from a seated position to help build up your squat foundation. The goal is to be able to practice all of those motions so that once we get back to our bodyweight squat, you're gonna be stronger, your range of motion is gonna be a lot better, but also you're gonna have more control over your body while you go through that movement. And just as how we can add weight into our seated squats, we can add weight into our regular bodyweight squats here as well. Now, I'm gonna go through one last variation here with you today, which is going to be the jump squat. which is going to be a great movement for any cardio that you're trying to do. This is gonna push the heart rate a lot. You're gonna feel that real quick once you get started. Now you can either do these jump squats from a standing position, or you can start from a seated position as well, okay? I'm gonna show you both in a moment here. So that's it from standing, and here it is from seated. So that was a jump squat from standing and seated positions. Now we're gonna break that movement down just a bit here, because normally with your squat, what we're doing is we're pushing through the heels, okay? But you're gonna notice when you're trying to jump, you can't jump from your heels. The jumping motion is gonna happen all from the front of your foot. So you're lifting off the front of your foot. So what that means is when you're squatting, the motion is gonna start pushing through your heel. However, as you come on upwards, so this is pushing through the heel, and you're going into this jump, that weight's gonna slowly roll from the heel onto the front of your foot, around where your toes are, okay? And as we land, we're gonna land back on our toes, and that weight's gonna shift back onto the heel. So it's heel to toe, and then toe to heel as we land, okay? Same concept there with the jump squat from a seated position as well. And those are our squat variations that we're going through today. I hope this helped you out. If you're just getting started with squatting, I would definitely recommend you try all of them out and keep on practicing them. These are all great to help build out your squat foundation so that you can get comfortable and strong enough to squat properly without injury in the future. Again, hope that helped you out. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, go ahead, drop them in the comments below. And if you don't mind doing me a favor, leaving us a quick like and subscribe to the channel really helps us out. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.